There comes a moment in life, a quiet, aching moment, when you realize you've been drifting. You wake up not from sleep, but from distraction. You see yourself not as the person you imagined you would be, but as a stranger tangled in the lives, needs, and expectations of others. And in that stillness, a question rises from somewhere deep. When did I stop living for myself? Too many people walk through life as ghosts of their potential. They abandon their own journey for comfort, for approval, for fear of standing alone. They give their time to things that drain them, their hearts to people who do not see them, and their energy to paths that are not theirs. They smile on the outside while slowly dying on the inside. But life, true life, begins the moment you decide to focus on yourself. Not selfishly but honestly, not arrogantly but courageously, because when you return to yourself, you stop wasting the one thing you can never get back, your time. Let's explore what it means to truly focus on yourself and stop wasting your life. There is a quiet tragedy in the way most people live. It is not marked by catastrophe, but by a slow and subtle departure from themselves. The child in the beginning is whole, raw, undivided, brimming with instinct and unfiltered desire. This child does not ask permission to be. He plays when he is called to play. She cries when the soul aches. There is no mask, only essence. But as we grow, the world teaches us to doubt this inner voice. It tells us there are better voices, louder voices, wiser voices, parents, teachers, preachers, institutions. And so we begin to edit ourselves. Bit by bit, we trade truth for approval. The inner compass, so alive and vibrant in our youth, grows faint. We stop consulting it. Eventually, we forget it exists at all. What replaces it is the burden of expectation. We learn that safety is found in following rules, in being agreeable, in meeting the standards of those who hold authority over us. We become students of what the world wants from us rather than who we actually are, and because the world rewards this behavior, with praise, with acceptance, with belonging, we confuse obedience with worthiness. We come to believe that we are good only when we are pleasing. We say yes when every fiber of our being whispers no. We pursue professions not out of desire, but out of duty. We stay in relationships that diminish us because we cannot imagine being alone. This is the silent betrayal, not loud, not dramatic, but deeply corrosive. It is the betrayal of the self. To focus on yourself is not to become selfish, but to return to what is real. It is to remember that beneath all your conditioning, you still exist. The real you, the one who knows instinctively what brings joy and what does not, the one who feels alive when doing certain things and dead when doing others, that self is not gone. It is simply waiting, waiting for your permission to return. Reclaiming your inner authority means making space for that voice again. It means pausing long enough to ask questions that may terrify you. What do I want? What matters to me? Who am I when I'm not performing? This journey is not romantic. It is often frightening, because to reclaim your inner authority is to stand alone, at least for a time. It means disappointing people who are invested in your compliance. It means defying traditions that gave you identity. It means facing the terrifying possibility that you have wasted years on a life that was never yours to begin with. But the alternative is worse, to spend the rest of your days disconnected from yourself, fulfilling obligations that have no meaning, and waking each morning with the weight of spiritual exhaustion. The story of Maya, though simple, is archetypal. It reflects the universal struggle between duty and desire, mask and essence, ego and soul. On the outside, she had everything: status, money, prestige, but the soul does not care for appearances. It demands truth. And the longer that truth is ignored, the louder it becomes. First a whisper, then a tension, then a breakdown. Her panic attack was not a failure. It was a message. a rupture in the psyche demanding wholeness. Her decision to leave the legal profession was not an act of rebellion. It was an act of remembering who she had always been beneath the mask, a nurturer, a teacher, a woman meant to inspire the young. And yes, it cost her financial security, familial approval, social respectability. But in return, she gained something that no external accolade could offer: peace, the quiet, sacred peace of alignment. This return to the self is the essence of psychological integration. It is the process of becoming whole again, of uniting the fragments of the psyche that were split in the name of survival. It requires courage, because you must confront all the ways in which you abandoned yourself. You must admit that you betrayed your own dreams, that you silenced your own truth, that you were complicit in your own suffering. But this confrontation is not meant to punish, it is meant to liberate. For only when you face your false life can you begin to build a true one. There is immense power in making your own choices, not choices handed down by culture or fear, but choices born from your deepest knowing. When you begin to do this, even in small ways, you reclaim lost parts of yourself. You begin to walk differently. You speak more honestly. You become less reactive, because you are no longer at war with yourself. You no longer need to prove or perform. You no longer chase meaning in places that offer only distraction. You are home, and home is within you. And yet, this path is not for everyone. Some will choose the familiar cage over the terrifying freedom of self-responsibility. That is their right, but for those who are ready, for those who are weary of the pretense and hungry for authenticity, the path is clear, not easy, but clear. It begins the moment you stop asking, "What should I do?" and begin asking, "What is true for me?" This act of reclamation is a quiet revolution. It does not require you to shout or rebel or burn your life down. It asks only that you listen, that you trust the still, small voice within, that you allow it to lead, even when the road is uncertain. And as you do, you will find that the world outside may resist, but your soul will rejoice, because the greatest authority you will ever know is not found in books, systems, or gurus. It is found in your own being. To focus on yourself is not a detour from your life. It is your life. Everything else is noise. There is a fear that lives deep within the modern soul, a fear not of darkness or death, but of being alone with oneself. In a world that worships busyness and constant connection, solitude has been cast into exile. It is seen as something to be avoided, a punishment, an indictment of social failure. And yet, paradoxically, it is only in solitude that the individual truly begins to exist. To learn the art of solitude is to step into a forgotten chamber of the psyche, a sacred interior where the voice of the self has long been silenced beneath the chorus of the world. Most people, when left alone, do not meet themselves. They meet their anxiety. And because they do not know how to sit with it, they run into noise, into screens, into relationships that offer company but not connection. The tragedy is not that we are alone. It is that we have lost the capacity to be alone. Loneliness and solitude are not the same. Loneliness is the ache for something external, the hunger for validation and belonging. Solitude is the reunion with what is internal. It is not an emptiness waiting to be filled, but a fullness waiting to be remembered. In solitude, one does not seek a mirror, but a window into the deeper layers of the soul. From a young age, we are taught to fear silence. In school, in our homes, in our social lives. Noise is equated with life, movement with progress. But what if we were wrong? What if it is in the stillness that we grow? What if the silence we so dread is actually the ground of all transformation, The self, like the earth, has seasons. There are times for action, times for harvest, times for relationship. But there are also winters of the soul, periods of withdrawal, of incubation, of descent. In these times, solitude is not optional, it is essential. It is the womb where new life is conceived, not externally, but internally. It is in solitude that we touch the roots of our existence and discover who we are when there is no one else to impress or appease. Consider for a moment how much of your life has been lived in response to others. How many of your choices were made not from desire, but from pressure? How often have you said yes to things your soul whispered no to, simply to avoid conflict or disapproval? When you enter solitude, you interrupt that pattern. You remove the audience. You create a space where authenticity becomes not only possible, but necessary. There is no one to perform for, no one to outshine, no one to lose. There is only you, and the truth that rises in the absence of performance. Many avoid solitude because they know, deep down, what it will reveal. It will show them the places they've abandoned themselves, the dreams they've deferred, the pain they've suppressed, the masks they've worn for so long that they forgot there was a face beneath. But this confrontation, though painful, is not punishment. It is the beginning of healing. The psyche, when given silence, will speak. It will guide, it will unravel, it will reweave, but only if you are still enough to listen. There is a story of a man who, in the midst of a successful career and a bustling family life, began to feel a growing unease. He had everything he was taught to want: a good income, a respected name, social standing. Yet there was a gnawing emptiness he could not explain. One day, during a family vacation, he chose to stay behind and spend a day alone. No phone, no distractions, just a walk in the woods. At first he felt restless, then anxious, but after hours of solitude something shifted. He began to feel emotions he hadn't acknowledged in years: regret, longing, sorrow, wonder. He saw how he had abandoned his passion for art, how he had become a stranger to himself. That one day changed everything. He began painting again. He started carving out moments of solitude each week. He didn't abandon his responsibilities, but he recentered his life. Not around expectations, but around meaning. This is the quiet revolution that solitude makes possible. It does not scream, it does not demand, it whispers, and if you are brave enough to listen, it will lead you home. There is empirical truth to this ancient wisdom. Psychologist Virginia Thomas's research points to what many mystics have known for centuries. Solitude enhances creativity, deepens self-understanding, and fosters authentic relationships. This is not mere theory, it is the soul's reality. When you know yourself, you stop seeking completion in others. When you are rooted in your own truth, you relate from fullness, not hunger. You no longer need someone to save you. You are no longer a shadow seeking light from outside. You become your own source. The world tells you that connection is everything. But what is the value of connection if the self you bring to it is hollow? If you are not anchored in who you are, you will use others as mirrors rather than companions. You will not love. They will merely reflect the parts of yourself you cannot face. And so, without solitude, even connection becomes counterfeit. Solitude is not a deed or from life. It is a return to it. It is not exile. It is initiation. To step into solitude is to cross a threshold. It is to enter the wilderness of the self and find that you are not lost, but waiting. Waiting to be seen, waiting to be heard, waiting to be chosen by the one person whose love you have always needed most, your own. We are living in a time where silence is rare and authenticity rarer still. To practice solitude is a radical act. It is a rebellion against a world that says you are only as valuable as your output, your productivity, your popularity. It is a declaration that your being is enough, that your presence matters, that your soul in its raw and unedited form is worthy of your time. And so, if you find yourself restless or afraid in the quiet, do not run, sit with it. Let the discomfort rise and fall. Let the waves of feeling pass through you. Beneath them you will find a deeper stillness, and in that stillness you will find yourself, not as the world has shaped you, but as you truly are, not perfect, not finished, but whole. That is the gift of solitude, and when you have received it, you will never again confuse it with loneliness. You will know it as a companion, a teacher, a mirror. And perhaps, in its presence, you will come to remember the most important truth of all, that you were never alone. You were simply waiting to return to yourself. There is a peculiar irony in the human condition. The very things we most need to confront are the things we are most desperate to avoid. We run not from monsters outside of us, but from the ghosts that live within, the memories we never processed, the emotions we were taught to suppress, the wounds we convinced ourselves were too small to matter. But those wounds did not disappear. They festered, and over time they shaped our lives more than we ever imagined. They formed the lenses through which we see the world, the patterns we repeat, the limits we accept as truth. You cannot focus on yourself, not truly, if the self you are focusing on is still bound by these hidden chains, and yet most people walk through life unaware of the weight they carry. It is not because they are weak, but because they are human. Pain, when not processed, does not die. It buries itself in the unconscious. It seeps into behavior. It cloaks itself in habits and choices that seem logical, even noble. A man may throw himself into his work, always chasing the next achievement, not realizing he is trying to prove his worth to a father who never said, "I'm proud of you." A woman may find herself constantly accommodating, saying yes when she wants to say no, not realizing that her nervous system was trained from childhood to equate love with self-erasure. These are not random personality quirks. They are survival strategies, and what once helped you survive can eventually become the very thing that blocks your growth. To heal what is holding you back is to stop confusing your coping mechanisms with your identity. It is to recognize that overachievement is not always ambition. It can be fear dressed as success, that pleasing is not kindness. It is often the strategy of someone who once learned that love must be earned, not given freely. That chronic busyness is not productivity. It is sometimes the desperate attempt to outrun an inner emptiness too vast to face. When we finally sit with ourselves, when we stop distracting and start listening, these truths begin to emerge. Not to shame us, but to free us. For what you bring into consciousness, you gain the power to transform. But what remains in shadow continues to direct your life from behind the scenes. Healing, however, is not the glamorous journey our culture makes it out to be. It is not a curated path with tidy milestones and Instagram-worthy revelations. It is raw, it is messy, it is often isolating. You will grieve things you didn't know you had lost. You will feel emotions that have waited decades to be felt. You will touch pain that has shaped your decisions, your relationships, your sense of self. And yet it is in this courageous descent into the heart of your inner world that true freedom begins. The path inward is not linear. It winds, it circles. At times you will feel as though you are regressing. At times you will question your sanity, but keep going, because what lies beneath the surface of your pain is not only darkness, it is power. The wound is not only a place of hurt, it is also a doorway. When you dare to enter it, you recover pieces of your soul that were exiled. You retrieve your lost vitality, your joy, your intuition, your sense of worth. You begin to reassemble the parts of yourself that were fragmented by trauma, by betrayal, by silence, And this integration, though invisible to the world, is the deepest act of self-love. Healing is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. It is about making peace with your history so it no longer defines your future. It is about learning to hold your inner child with tenderness instead of judgment, to ask her, what did you need that you never received? And to give it to her now with the compassion she was once denied. It is about forgiving yourself, not because what you did was always right, but because punishing yourself will not undo the past. You forgive because you finally understand that you were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time, and it is about releasing the guilt that was never yours to carry, the guilt of being too sensitive, too needy, too much. Those labels were never true. They were projections placed upon you by those who could not meet you in your fullness. Think of Amir, a man like so many others, charming, successful, seemingly confident. But beneath the surface there was a pattern. Relationship after relationship ended in the same pain. He blamed fate, circumstance, his partners, until one day, exhausted and broken, he sat across from a therapist and said, "I don't know why I keep ending up here." That one sentence was the beginning of everything. In time, he came to see that he had been recreating the emotional distance he experienced in childhood, that on some unconscious level, he believed love meant being unseen, unheard, unheld. And so he was drawn to those who could not meet him emotionally, because it felt familiar, because it felt safe. But familiarity is not the same as truth. Once he saw this, he had a choice, to continue reenacting the past or to choose a new story. And in choosing differently, he began to heal not just his relationships, but his relationship with himself. This is the quiet miracle of inner work. It changes everything, without anything needing to change externally. It teaches you to trust your own voice, to stop looking outside for validation, to stop mistaking chaos for passion and silence for rejection. As you heal, you raise your standards, not out of pride, but out of reverence. You begin to recognize what no longer fits, not because it is bad, but because it is too small for who you are becoming. But healing is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong unfolding. There will always be deeper layers. There will always be new triggers that reveal old wounds, but you will meet them differently, with more grace, with more clarity, with the awareness that every emotion, every reaction, every discomfort is a messenger, not a threat. And in listening to these messengers, you become more conscious, more grounded, more whole. You cannot build a new life on old wounds. You cannot focus on your growth while dragging the weight of your unexamined past. Something must be laid down before something new can rise, and that something is often your resistance to feeling, your belief that you must be strong all the time, your attachment to the story of who you had to be. Healing asks you to surrender all of this, not to become someone else, but to become who you were before the world told you to be someone else. To heal is to say, I am no longer willing to live in a prison built from my past. I choose freedom, I choose depth, I choose myself, and in doing so you do not just change your life. You change your lineage, you break patterns that have lived in your blood for generations. You become the one who said, "It ends with me," and there is no nobler path than that. There is something deeply invisible, yet profoundly sacred, that determines the course of your life. Not your wealth, not your status, not even your talents. It is your energy. It is that unseen, intangible essence that fuels every word you speak, every thought you entertain, every emotion you hold, and every step you take. It is your most intimate resource, the very core of your vitality. And yet it is the one thing most people give away without thought, without boundaries, without discernment. They treat it as though it is infinite, as though it can be replenished without rest, as though it will always be there. But when your energy is spent, when your spirit is fractured by 1,000 careless leaks, you come to learn the truth in the most painful way, that your life follows your energy. Wherever it flows, your life goes. We live in a culture that exalts productivity and praises self-sacrifice, but this praise often comes at a cost. We admire those who are always available, endlessly giving, perpetually connected. But beneath this admiration lies a deep fracture, a soul that has forgotten how to retreat, how to conserve, how to honor its own limits. There is nothing noble in burnout. There is no virtue in being depleted. It is not a badge of honor to be exhausted by life. It is a sign that you have stopped guarding the gates of your being. To truly focus on yourself, you must begin to see your energy as sacred, not precious in a fragile way, but in a powerful way. Your energy is the soil from which everything grows, your ideas, your love, your work, your healing. If that soil is polluted with chaos, fatigue, and overextension, nothing rooted in it can thrive. To protect your energy is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of survival. More than that, it is an act of self-respect. When you treat your time and emotional space as something to be traded for approval or comfort, you diminish your worth. But when you become selective, intentional, discerning, you declare that your life is yours. And this discernment begins with awareness. Ask yourself, where does your energy go each day? What do you allow into your field that costs you more than it gives? Who do you keep close out of guilt, habit, or fear? What habits siphon your mental clarity and leave you restless? The answers are often subtle, hidden not in grand betrayals but in small compromises. An hour spent scrolling through other people's lives while yours remains neglected. A conversation you tolerate that leaves you depleted. A job that drains you not just of time but of meaning. These things add up, not just in minutes or tasks, but in your soul's capacity to feel alive. People often confuse kindness with access. But to be kind is not to be endlessly available. To be compassionate is not to be boundaryless. You can love someone and still say no. You can care and still protect your peace. A boundary is not a wall meant to isolate. It is a gate meant to filter. It lets in what nurtures and keeps out what poisons. And yet, most people hesitate to set boundaries because they fear rejection. They fear appearing cold, arrogant, ungrateful. But what is the greater cost? To lose the approval of others, or to lose yourself? Every time you say yes when your soul means no, you create a fracture. And these fractures, over time, become fatigue. They become resentment. They become the aching feeling that you are living everyone's life but your own. There is a reason that those who create at the highest levels, artists, thinkers, athletes, are fiercely protective of their time, their rituals, their environments. They know that brilliance is not born from chaos, but from clarity. They understand that to give their best to the world, they must first give their best to themselves. They retreat. They say no. They spend time in silence. They curate their spaces. Not because they are better than others, but because they know their energy is not infinite. And neither is yours. Imagine your energy as a flame. Every interaction is either feeding that flame or dimming it. Every commitment is either aligned with your purpose or pulling you further from it. When you begin to view your life through this lens, decisions become clearer. You no longer waste energy on things that don't nourish you. You no longer argue to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer seek validation in places that require you to abandon yourself. Instead, you become grounded, rooted in what is essential. There is a deep peace that comes when you reclaim your energy. A quiet power. You stop rushing. You stop explaining. You stop proving. You become more intentional in your yes, more confident in your no. You begin to notice beauty again. You begin to feel spacious inside your own life. And it is from this space that all things blossom: creativity, love, wisdom, healing. But none of it is possible in a life overrun by noise. Ask yourself each day not just what you want to do, but how you want to feel. Ask yourself not just what is urgent, but what is worthy. What feeds your spirit? What calms your nervous system? Who respects your boundaries and honors your essence? And just as importantly, what pulls you out of yourself? What leaves you hollow, reactive, scattered? This kind of radical honesty is the first step in reclaiming your life force. To guard your energy is to choose your life with intention. It is to say, my time is not for sale, my mind is not a dumping ground, my heart is not a revolving door. It is to remember that you are not obligated to participate in everything you're invited to. You are not required to be accessible to everyone. You are not meant to carry what is not yours. And every time you protect your energy, you affirm the sacredness of your own path. In a world that profits from your distraction and thrives on your exhaustion, to be well, rested, focused, and grounded is a revolutionary act. And this revolution begins in the smallest of moments. The pause before a reply, the silence you choose over noise, the breath you take before committing to something. These moments add up. They become a life. And that life, when built from preserved energy and clear intention, becomes one of depth, purpose, and peace. Your energy shapes your reality. Protect it, and you protect the possibility of becoming who you truly are. Waste it, and you will watch your life become a blur of obligations that were never yours to begin with. The choice is not easy, but it is clear. Your life depends on it, because your life is it. There comes a point in every person's life when the veil must be lifted, when the illusions we were taught to hold sacred begin to fall away one by one. We spend much of our early years searching outside of ourselves for the architect of our lives. We seek comfort in the notion that someone will arrive to fix what's broken, to guide us when we falter, to lift us from the depths when the darkness grows too thick. But here is the truth that both liberates and terrifies. No one is coming. Not your parents, though they may have once been your gods. Not your lover, no matter how tender their arms. Not your boss, your friends, your mentors. There is no savior walking toward you through the fog. The door does not open outward. It opens inward. To take radical responsibility for your becoming is not merely to assume control of your actions. It is to confront head-on the most sobering truth there is, that your life in its current form is yours. The choices made, the dreams abandoned, the chaos endured, the comfort you cling to. You may not be to blame for what was done to you, but you are responsible for what you do with it now. This is not punishment, it is power. For as long as you wait for someone else to change your life, you are handing over the reins of your soul. There is a certain dignity in choosing to become the architect of your own becoming, to stop waiting for permission, to stop bargaining with fate, to stop rehearsing excuses. Yes, you may have been wounded. Yes, the world may have failed you. But the deeper tragedy is not that pain entered your life. It is that you began to believe your life must orbit around it. You began to let your story be narrated by what others did to you, rather than by what you are now willing to do for yourself. Responsibility in this sense is not a burden. It is a reawakening. It is the soul returning to its rightful seat, no longer exiled by blame, fear, or delay. It is looking at the scattered pieces of your life and saying, "This is mine, all of it." Not as a way to punish yourself, but to reclaim your authorship. The pen has always been in your hand. And if the story has veered off course, it is not because you were powerless. It is because you did not yet know your power. There is a tendency in the human psyche to delay change under the guise of preparation. When I have more time, we say, when I'm more confident, when I have the right resources. But this is the ego's greatest trick, to make you believe that readiness is a condition of action rather than its result. The truth is, no moment will ever feel fully safe. No leap will ever feel fully secure. The only way to grow into the person you are meant to become is to begin while you still feel unworthy, uncertain, and afraid. And that is precisely what makes the act sacred. Do not wait for clarity. It will come after commitment. Do not wait for a sign. You are the sign. Your desire, your discomfort, your longing. These are not coincidences. They are summons. They are your soul calling you back to yourself. But you must choose. You must act. You must become more interested in your evolution than in your excuses. Each day presents you with a simple but profound question: what kind of life do I want to build, and what can I do today to move toward it? This question, when asked with sincerity, cuts through the fog. It silences the noise. It reminds you that while you cannot build a cathedral in a day, you can lay a single stone, and then another, and another. It is not the magnitude of your effort that determines your trajectory. It is your willingness to begin, again and again, even when the path is unclear. There is something holy about small steps taken in the direction of your becoming, a single hour of focus, a courageous conversation, a walk instead of scrolling, a no where once you said yes. These are not insignificant, they are tectonic. They shift the foundation of your reality, one choice at a time, but only if you are willing to stop outsourcing your power, only if you are willing to stop telling the story of why you can't, and start writing the story of how you will. There will be moments of doubt, moments when your old self begs you to return to comfort, moments when your wounds whisper that you are not capable, not worthy, not strong enough. But these voices are not truth. They are echoes. They are remnants of the self you are shedding. And the more you resist taking responsibility, the louder they become. It is only by stepping forward that they begin to quiet, because nothing silences the inner critic like inner action. To take radical responsibility is not to be perfect. It is not to have every answer. It is to be in relationship with your life, to treat your time, your choices, your energy, your future as something sacred. It is to understand that becoming is not something that happens to you. It is something you forge. Like iron in fire, like stone into sculpture, like seed into bloom, there is immense freedom in this truth. If you are the one who made the mess, you are the one who can clean it. If you were the one who abandoned your dreams, you are the one who can wake them up. If you have been sleepwalking through your days, you are the one who can open your eyes. There is no shame in how long it took you to realize this. The only tragedy would be not acting now that you know. Your life will not change through magic. It will change through movement, through the effort you make, through the courage you summon, through the refusal to waste another day in the waiting room of someday. The life you want, whatever it looks like, will not be handed to you. It must be chosen, it must be built, it must be embodied, and that begins with a decision to stop being the victim of your circumstances and start being the creator of your future. A decision to stop asking for permission and start giving yourself a reason. A decision to look at the raw, unpolished truth of your life and say, yes, this is where I begin, and I will not stop until I become who I came here to be. You were not born to drift. You were not born to shrink, to serve everyone else while abandoning yourself. You are born to live, fully, honestly, fiercely, and it begins with one choice: to come home to yourself. Focus on that. The rest will follow.